All right, the biggest story that we are getting for you at this hour is India and Russia and that meet that is all set to take place starting tomorrow. Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to arrive in New Delhi tomorrow for a high-stakes two-day state visit. His first visit to India in 4 years since the Ukraine conflict reshaped global ties. At the invitation of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Putin will co-chair the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit, holding wide-ranging talks to bolster the special and privileged strategic partnership amid mounting Western pressures. On the agenda, ramping up defense cooperation with potential deals for advanced S-400 systems and Su-57 fighter jets, sealing more discounted Russian oil imports to counter trade imbalances, and exploring joint ventures in energy, agriculture and shipping. Putin arrives with a heavyweight delegation including his defense minister and is expected to meet President Draupadi Murmu as well, with several intergovernmental pacts slated for signing. This visit signals India's firm commitment to strategic autonomy even as US tariffs bite. Expect a strong reaffirmation of Moscow-Delhi bonds in a multipolar world. And meanwhile, let's take a look at what's on the card for both the countries. And when we look at the various deals that are supposed to be signed in those 2 days, it is massive. We're looking at defense, we're looking at technology transfer, and let's look at what's on the agenda. So for both the countries, defense cooperation, the Russian version is there is a push for additional S-400 air defense systems and the Su-57 stealth fighter jets, while the Indian version is that it is expanding the S-400 procurement and Su-57 talks as alternatives to Western jets. Now remember why these two things are important. The S-400 defense systems played a very important role in Operation Sindoor. We hit a target 306 kilometers deep into the enemy territory. So India will be looking at expanding that, and Russia also wants to push forward its defense cooperation. When we look at Su-57 or the Su-57 stealth fighter jets, they are the 5th generation fighter jets, highly technical, highly advanced, and India will be looking to replace all Western fleets with the Su-57 fighter jets. Another thing that we look at defense cooperation is to finalize the Reloss Logistics Pact for mutual basing and refueling. So the Reloss military pact was just ratified by the Russian Duma, in fact 2-3 days ago, just before the visit. So we are expecting that India and Russia will finalize this entire pact in those 2 days coming forward. The Indian version is to ratify the Reloss for joint exercise, Arctic access, discharge remaining Indian recruits in the Russian army. So remember, there are various parts to this entire Reloss pact that we are looking at. We are looking at those Indian recruits in the Russian army. Remember, Russia has also, in fact, given out a press conference stated that you should be very careful when you're looking at job prospects over there. Be careful to examine all the previous threats. And India will be looking at all of this in that Reloss pact that has just been ratified by the Russian Duma. Energy and nuclear cooperation. So when we looked at defense, now let's look at energy and nuclear cooperation. Remember, energy has been a big flashpoint between India and Russia. And also the US, because Russia wants India, in fact, not to take in Russian energy or fuel. So when we look at energy and nuclear cooperation, the Russian version is that it is going to offer small modular reactors or SMR and tech transfer and expertise. So they want to transfer very small modular reactors and also want tech transfers to be given to India. What the Indian version is that it wants to complete the Kundankulam reactors. It wants an MOU on civil nuclear cooperation, including SMRs. So remember, this is a very important point because we are also looking at MOUs on civil nuclear cooperation. And remember that the Parliament is also in session and there is a very important bill on nuclear energy as well. So we will be in fact seeing India push forward this agenda during the meeting. Now, when we again look at energy and nuclear cooperation, the Russian version is that they continue discounted crude oil supplies and new trade corridors or sea routes. So, as we have been mentioning and as we have been saying that Russia has been providing India crude oil prices crude oil at a very good price as compared to the Western options that we have, and Russia wants to continue doing that because India is its all-weather friend, and it also wants to set up new trade corridors, maybe new sea routes going forward. India is looking to insulate energy imports from the US sanctions and boost renewables or joint ventures. Now remember, India is already under heavy sanctions from the US because of its policy of taking up Russian oil. India is looking to insulate that. It is looking to boost new renewables and joint ventures in the energy sector. When we look at trade and economic cooperation, so we've seen defense, we've seen nuclear energy, we've seen energy sector. Let's look at trade and economy and what Russia and India are going to discuss. The Russian version is that it's targeting $100 billion bilateral trade by 2030, increase in Russian imports of Indian pharma, food and engineering. So when we are looking at trade, Russia is looking to improve it to $100 billion by 2030, and the sectors that it is actually looking at is Indian pharma, food and engineering. Indian version is address trade imbalance, the oil imports which are skew, and look at local currency trade to evade all the sanctions that are in place. Next, when we are looking at another thing that's on the agenda, we will come forth to that because there are various things that are on the agenda. Can we have the next slide, please? So when we are looking at trade and economic cooperation, Russian version, they are trying to promote rupee and the ruble settlements to counter dollar dominance, and India-Russia Business Forum. Indian version is that labor mobility or MOU for Indian workers in Russian sectors and investments in tech and infra. So these are the two versions that we are looking at on the trade front. They want to balance out that dollar dominance, the Russian side. India wants MOUs on Indian workers working in various sectors in Russia. Now, global and regional cooperation, one of the most important things going forward in this geopolitical scenario. Russia wants exchange on BRICS or SCO, joint statement on strategic partnership. The Indian version is to cover regional stability, the Indo-Pacific and the Arctic region, and multipolarity without alienating the West. So while the Russian version wants more emphasis on BRICS, on SCO and joint statements, India wants regional strength, it wants Indo-Pacific strength in that region. Russia also are looking, we are also India will also be in fact looking at multipolarity, but it does not want to alienate the West. So those were those important factors, those cooperation areas that we will be looking at in that high stakes meet that is all set to take place. Joining us on the broadcast is Ambassador KP Fabian, who is a former diplomat. Thank you, sir, for joining us. A very good morning to you. We are looking at this very significant historic meet between Vladimir Putin and also our Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We are looking at a lot of areas of cooperation. What, as per your understanding, is the biggest area that we should be focusing on in this meet?
Thank you. Good morning. Well, we still do not know what exactly is being planned, except that there was a long sort of press conference by Peskov, President Putin's spokesperson, And there have been some indications from our Ministry of External Affairs also. But as far as I can make out, defense ties will be very important, whether it is S-400, even S-500, and even Su, Sukhoi 57, So that is one part. But the Russians are very keen on discussing trade. And as Peskov said, we should not permit third countries from, interfering in our bilateral trade. Now, my view is that Russia knows very well that the Indian companies, which have been importing from oil from Russia, cannot go on importing because the companies will be getting into trouble with the United States. Then they cannot do any business in the U.S. market. But at the same time, Russia will sort of put emphasis on this matter, partly to get some relief and partly to put pressure on us on other matters. Now, coming to the relief, I do not know what might happen, but I can suggest one formula, and that is India should have a company which deals only with Russia, imports and exports from Russia. And now that company will not be vulnerable to U.S. sanctions, but that depends partly on the Reserve Bank of India. On the whole, the Putin visit is very important, and it is clear that the Russian side, and I'm sure the Indian side too, have thoroughly prepared this visit in order to get very important concrete results.
All right, I believe there is some issue with the connection over there, but remember that this is a very important meet that we are expecting going forward. I thank you, Ambassador Fabian, for joining